Hello, and welcome to another episode of Crossing Bridges Talk Show. I'm your host, Larry Montgomery Sr. This is my co host, Will. Will, introduce yourself.
Good evening, everybody. I'm William Montgomery. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. Now, we've got that out the way. What are we going to talk about this week? We're going to talk about racism, part two of five, assuming that we get to all of them. But this is a hard subject to talk about. First off, because it impacts each and every one of us every day in one way or another. Some of us choose to ignore it because it's just too big a topic or issue to really try to wrap your mind around. And some of us ignore it because we're so busy living in it and trying to survive in it that, we just don't see it. And then there's those of us who are kind of like, wow, this is what's been going on all along, and I didn't really recognize it until, now, type of a thing. And so, as a father, it is my responsibility to, because I know it's an issue, to talk to my son about it and to kind of inform. I'm not saying, I'm going to indoctrinate him, but lay out some points for consideration. Because we all live our lives, we all have our understandings and so on and so forth. And just lay it out and say, well, if you see this rock in the middle of the road, you know it's a rock and not a pebble, type of a thing. Okay. So I have a video. It's about 10 minutes long. It's an introduction to, let me just see if I get the title right. Hold on. Oh, well, it's a prelude to a video series, which I don't know if we're going to be able to show, but we will definitely try to direct people to. The name of that video is Race, the Power of an Illusion. And this particular gentleman I'm going to put up in a moment, he has a website. Let me see. Oh my goodness, I'm trying to find a spot here where this article begins. uh, it's a long article, but I'm not going to go through it. But there's some very interesting points that he's made here. And first, I want to start with the origin of the idea of race. Interesting topic, huh? This is not new to anthropologists. Since the 1940s, when Ashley Monto argued against the use of the term race in science, a growing number of scholars in many disciplines have declared that the real meaning of race in America and American society has to do with social realities quite distinct from physical variations in the human species. Now, before I get to that, I want to put up the video, and we'll go through that first. Let's see here. I'm going to.
My name is John Powell. I'm a professor at UC Berkeley in law, ethnic studies, and African American studies, and I hold the Robert Haas Chair in Diversity and Inclusion, and I direct the Haas Institute for a Fair and Inclusive Society. The Race and Power of Illusion project has been extremely important. It's been seen by millions of people. I think it was one of the early film expressions that race as a biological concept is an illusion, which is where the title comes from. And I oftentimes say race may be an illusion, or certainly a biological illusion, but racism is a sociological fact, a real fact, and it's complicated. And I think the film, 3 parts, actually talked about the complexity and helped people see that it's not just an idea. It's inscribed in our schools, it's inscribed in our churches, it's inscribed in our neighborhoods, in our housing, and it's inscribed in the way we sort of see each other's body. That was important when the film was made several years ago. It's even more important now because we're actually dealing with the basically stratification of people across a number of different factors. And again, it's not just an idea, it's real, it has an impact. And finally, I would say one of the things that we didn't deal with a lot in the film that actually is important now is the way the mind science and the structures interact to produce these very disturbing realities. We're in a huge shift in the world, and the shift is who belongs and who does not belong, who's part of the we. And I think the film is a really powerful foundation to help lay that groundwork. Finally, I would say that many people, even people who are liberal and may have a diverse group of friends, don't realize our history, don't realize that we have a lived history that explains much of what's going on now, that explains, for example, the life disparities, the health disparities, the wealth disparities, the education disparities, and even begin to explain what's happened politically in the age of right-wing nationalism, right-wing fascism that's happening around the world. This film, this project, is really for everyone. My understanding is being shown, the film is Race, Power, Illusion, is being shown in Berkeley High and maybe other high schools around the country. It's also great for educators, for politicians, for the general public. Millions of people have seen it, but millions more need to see it. So I think it's really important to actually engage this project. And one of the things that's interesting about it is not just a description of the history of how we got to where we are. It also suggests how we get to where we want to get to. Because race, we know, is socially constructed. What the film helps us do is to see how it is being constructed and how it can be reconstructed. It's not something we're stuck with. It's not inevitable. We will do race differently. We're doing it differently today than we did 20 years ago, and we'll do it differently 20 years from now. The question is, will we do it in a positive way that invites the kind of world we want to live in, or will we do it in a negative way that will put not only us but the whole world in peril? One of the key themes in the film is about the racial wealth gap, and wealth is important. There are many different indicators to contribute to racial disparities, racial tension, racial dictatorship, as Michael Omi and Howard Winek talks about. So wealth is extremely important, and wealth is inherited. In some ways, it's inherited racialization, inherited racism. Wealth is transferred from one generation to the next. And most Americans have their wealth in their homes. So housing is particularly important in terms of understanding wealth formation, especially in the middle class and lower middle class. The elites are more likely in the stock market and trades, but the vast majority of middle class people have their wealth, if they have any wealth, in their home. And housing was incredibly segregated, which means this wealth was segregated, and the production of wealth is segregated. So in a sense, wealth was not created for the black community and later the Latino community. And we just had a huge recession. We're coming out of that recession now. And again, housing is the key to that. And we're finding that, once again, blacks are not recovering from that recession. So there's a huge wealth gap. And wealth is probably the single most important indicator to tell us how our life will actually turn out. Will we be able to send our children to school? Will we be able to pay for health care? Will we be able to live in a safe neighborhood? How we treat each other is important, but wealth is an important mediating factor. And so wealth is radically racialized. There are a couple of books that I would mention. One of them is called Being Black, Living in the Red by Dalton. Another one is Black Wealth, White Wealth. So wealth is very much an expression of how we create race, how we create racialized outcomes, and how we maintain a stratified system. If we're going to address that, we have to address wealth. There's one significant thing that I want to mention that's changed since the film was first made. We're beginning to better understand that it's not just the difference between white wealth and black wealth, if you will, which is about 10 cents to the dollar, but also the elites. The elites are pulling away from whites, blacks, the middle class. So we've long talked about racial segregation, opportunity segregation, and now we're talking about wealth segregation. Society is being divided up and stratified across another axis. And that axis has actually been there for decades, if not centuries, but it's becoming more prominent. And again, it sort of points to what we need to think about in terms of a solution. Even that conservative organization, International Monetary Fund, say once you have incredible wealth or income inequality, it begins to undermine the structures of society like democracy and the economy itself. I've used the film many times, and maybe part of it is I certainly use the part that I'm in, the house that we live in. But I actually like all the parts. I like the parts where they're actually looking at how much difference there is between different races. And I won't do much of a spoiler, but the differences between race is much smaller than differences within race from a biological or chromosome level. So race really is a social construct. And I love to sort of see students grapple with that because people think that they can see race, and they can only see race through the lens of social understanding. It's not just out there. It has social understanding, social meaning, and social practice. But of course, one of my favorite parts is the part starring me. And if you haven't seen it, you have to see that as well. No film is complete and no film is perfect, but this one is pretty close. But there are some additions that I would add, especially given where we are now. So I run something called the Haas Institute for a Fair and Inclusive Society at UC Berkeley. And we have taken our what we've learned from race, but expanded it. And so we talk about othering, it's a funny word, othering and belonging. And the way we other people, race is one way in which we other people, that is to say, you don't fully belong. You're not in the we. And of course, historically, the United States said that expressly in the Dred Scott case, that blacks could never be part of the political we of America. In some ways, that's what Trump is really revisiting, who belongs and who does not belong. But I like the idea of belonging and othering because it captures all the different ways in which we tell people that it can be about age, and so it gives us a much larger lens. Because sometimes when you talk about race, people get a little too parochial and say, well, first of all, when you talk about race, you're talking about black people, which is not accurate. We're talking about racialized systems and structures that are actually animated most by whiteness, not white people, by whiteness. But I think expanding the concept to understand we're really talking about othering and belonging and the interventions to othering. And the intervention to othering, as like the intervention to race, is not saming. So the intervention to race is not colorblindness or making everybody the same. The intervention to race, the intervention to othering is belonging. And belonging actually is a complicated process where we recognize each other's full humanity and our interconnectedness to each other, but also our right and our responsibility to co-create the world that we will co-inhabit. So we're a long ways from there now, and that's the big fight. We have a large inclusive we where people belong and participate, or do we have a narrow we where we build walls and try to exclude everyone that we think does not belong?
Okay. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you know that was a lot of words that were introduced there. I think that's why he is a professor because he likes to use those big words and invent other words and stuff like that. But you know, they make people think and reimagine stuff. But yeah, race is a real thing, and like a social construct, as the man said. But I think they take stuff and always try to have an angle on it. It's like, you know, if people do stuff, people do stuff. It doesn't matter what their political affiliation is. It doesn't matter what their color is, because you could be black just like me and want to kill me. You could be white just like, the president right now and want to be my best friend. I mean, love me to death, want me to come over to dinner and, be a part of the family. I mean, not everybody is the same. And to classify everybody as the same because of their color is really not beneficial to anybody getting to a better standard of life. Because if I say all white people are evil, and I tell everybody that's black that all white people are evil, when they walk down the street, they're like, oh, well, this person doesn't like me because I'm black, and I should get rid of them before they get rid of me. You know what I'm saying? Nobody would have peace of mind. And then if you, on the flip side, if a white person tells other white people, hey, these black people, they want to do this, they want to do harm to us, and they believe that, and then now you got everybody, as they say, is divided, building walls, but they're talking about inclusiveness, but they're steadily identifying the differences that is really what you could have invisible walls. I mean, like I could walk down the street and say, I don't want to talk to nobody that's not my family. It's not a physical wall, it's an invisible wall, but this is what he's doing with his statements about othering and belonging and inclusiveness, but then you point out the people that think differently than you as opponents or problematic. And it's like, how is that inclusiveness if you're deliberately pointing out people that don't think like you as being the problem? Because isn't that what racism was built on? Because if the people that created it looked at black people as people that were different than them, thought different than them, and they chose to label them, and therefore use that label to keep them at an arm's distance, that's the same thing that he's doing. It's just almost like reverse racism, in my mind.
Alrighty then. Um, I a couple of comments I want to make before I go to the next point. Just because I can't believe my voice. Am I? I'm not even coming across clearly. The devil is just getting busy. Anyway, just because all of the people around you are doing something, and I'm not talking about you personally, I'm just saying all of the people in general are doing something a particular way, does not make it right. Right? Okay. People around you, majority of people around you, are doing things a particular way because it works for the majority of people who are around you. Okay? Now, let me give some quick points, really short, on race. Because this is an important issue, because it is basically what drives this particular society here in America. Racism. Let me just get to where I want to be. Okay. Our eyes tell us that people look different. No one has trouble distinguishing a Czech from a Chinese. But what do these differences mean? Has the idea of race always been with us? Is skin color more than skin deep? How does race affect people today? There's less and more to race than meets the eye. One, and I'm just going to give you the headings. Race is a modern idea. Ancient societies like the Greeks did not divide people according to physical distinctions, but according to religion, status, gender, class, even language. The English language didn't even have the word race until it turned up in 1508 in a poem by William Dunbar referring to the line of kings. Number two, race has no genetic basis. Not one characteristic, trait, or even one gene distinguishes all the members of one so-called race from all members of another so-called race. Number 3, the human subspecies didn't exist. Unlike many animals, modern humans simply haven't been around long enough or populations isolated enough to evolve into separate subspecies or races. Despite surface appearances, we are among the most similar of all species. Number 4, skin color really is only skin deep. Most traits are inherited independently from one another. The genes influencing skin color have nothing to do with the genes influencing hair form, height, blood type, musical talent, athletic ability, or forms of intelligence. Knowing one trait, like skin color, doesn't necessarily tell you anything else about a person's other traits. Number 5, most variation is within, not between races. One of the small amount of total human genetic variation, 85%, exists within any local population. Be they Italians, Kurds, Koreans, or Cherokees, about 94% can be found within any continent. That means 2 random Koreans may be genetically different as a Korean and an Italian. Number 6, slavery predates race. Throughout much of human history, societies have enslaved others, often as a result of conquest or war, even debt, but not because of physical characteristics or a belief in natural inferiority. Due to the unique set of historical circumstances, ours was the first slave system where all the slaves shared similar physical characteristics. Now, there are 3 more. Number 7, race and freedom evolved together. The U.S. was founded on the radical new idea that all men are created equal, but our early economy was based largely on slavery. How could this anomaly be rationalized? The new idea of race helped explain why some people could be denied the rights and freedoms that others took for granted. Number 8, race justifies social inequalities as natural. As the idea of race took hold, white superiority became common sense in white America. It rationalized not only slavery, but also the extermination of Indians, exclusion of Asian immigrants, and the taking of Mexican lands by a nation that otherwise professed a deep belief in liberty and equality. Racialized practices became institutionalized within American government, laws, and society, and persist even though de jure segregation ended. Number 9, race isn't biological, but racism is still real. Racism is a powerful social force that gives people different access to opportunities and resources. Our government and social institutions disproportionately, albeit often invisibly, channel wealth, power, and resources to the unmarked race, white people. This affects everyone, whether we are aware of it or not. And lastly, number 10, colorblindness will not end racism. Pretending race doesn't exist is not the same as creating equality. Racism is more than stereotypes and individual prejudice. To tackle racism, we need to identify and remedy social policies and institutional practices that advance some groups at the expense of others. You're still with me? Okay. The thing is, man, and you're muted. I can see that. Um, this whole thing about race is something that man, or some men, came to understand works well for them.
Mhm.
And it just blossomed and bloomed. We've had conversations about the media and its impact on society. We've had conversations about wealth, black wealth and white wealth, how to get it and who's got it and why they have it. This thing, this animal, disease, if you will, about racism. Hold on, somebody's writing. That would include not having race as an item on paperwork. I need more from that from this lady, Shalonda Addison. Um, Give me some more on that because I'm missing a point there. So let me go on as I'm still here. This thing was created decades ago, and it just grew, and it became the norm. A lot of people around us thinking the same way, leaning in the same direction at the same time, began to feel that this is the way things should be. There is no science to racism. There is no physical phenomena here. It's not like, everybody's got a nose, right? At least that we know of, everybody's got a nose.
Mhm.
But we all have noses. It's not some of us have and some of us don't. When you look at racism in our society, those who don't have noses are different. I didn't say they weren't human, but they're different. And then the thinking went, well, if they're different, they must not be human. Oh, yeah, because some scientists said that this was true. And I have more information, but I'm not going to get that today. Oh, okay, she wrote something else. Speaking to the erasure and how we fix racism, right? Okay, fixing racism. We can talk about that. That's a concept that is far beyond my skull and pay grade. Um, what what I hope to do here is to provide some information, some platform, whereas as other black fathers want to have this conversation with their children, that they'll have something to work with. I mean, we're all not going to become experts in this particular field, because the reality is it's not a field. It's a social construct. And so when you go back to understanding societies and how they come together, then only after you understand that, you can have the conversation about racism and how it's impacted our society. To the point of, we as black people, the ones who are suffering from it within this environment, a lot of us don't understand that we're suffering. We can rationalize individually, oh, well, there's justification for this. This makes sense because of that. But all of those that's and all of those justifications are a part of the recipe that we've all become comfortable with eating. Okay? Well, not all of us. Some of us actually understand that, it's not about you, it's not about me. It's not about some random white guy. It's about the social structure. I can turn white right now, and I can see in my own head what we done as white people is wrong. But I can't and I won't do anything about it, because I be one of the few standing out there talking about this don't make sense. We do it, but it don't make sense. We do it, we know it don't make sense, but we justify it. And case in point, in our conversation to come, we're going to talk about the science of racism. And we're going to see that scholars and scientists who bought into this racism thing, ideal, bought into it mainly to get a check. You're out there as a scientist looking for the Holy Grail, not the Holy Grail, but looking for the definition of DNA. You know, this is before we got to DNA, and we really haven't fully developed the DNA thing. But in order for you to continue to do your work, you got to earn a living somehow. Oh, so what's the big deal? Maybe writing a paper justifying this concept of racism. Or even if I think that racism makes sense, by me putting my name on that list of people who believe this, I can get a check. Then I can continue to do my heart's desire type thing. So when we really start to look at it, and I'm not saying let's spend a lifetime trying to understand racism. We've got about 2 or 3 more shows. And I think you will see the things that we've used as a foundation for understanding our society and how it works. The underpin is based on the benefits someone saw in racial separation. Ergo, racism. Did I lose you?
No, you didn't lose me.
Okay, cool.
Having a little technical difficulty. I gotta cut my camera off for a second, turn this phone alarm off, and I'll be right back. But
Okay.
I'm listening, and I will have something
Okay.
to say. Okay, just a moment.
I got you. Now we're going to spend some time in the next week or so, hopefully. Race, the Power of an Illusion is California's newsreel's acclaimed 3-part series broadcast by PBS that challenges one of our most fundamental beliefs, that human beings come bungled into a few distinct groups. But just because race isn't innately biological doesn't mean it isn't real. The series also scrutinizes where the idea of race came from, how it took such a hold over our minds, and why race still matters. I can give you the website if you want to check that out in advance. The website is www.racepowerofan-illusion.org. That's www.racepowerofan-illusion.org. Okay. I mean, it's kind of hard to really get a lot of people to really understand, because just like Russia and the Ukraine right now, Russia's this huge country, almost a continent by itself in size, compared to the Ukraine, which is not small, it's a good sized country. But the Russians have decided that we want to take the Ukraine over. And they justified, we had it and then we lost it, the people want to be here, The reality is, if they wanted to be Russians, they would leave the Ukraine and go to Russia. If they wanted to have Russia in the Ukraine, they would invite the Russians in. So the reality is, Ukraine wants to be the Ukraine, Russia wants to be Russia. but Russia wants to control and take over Ukraine. In this society where white folks saw the opportunity, yo, number one on the agenda was we get cheap labor. And that wasn't a thought coming from rich people because the white folks that came here came from Europe, which already had a caste system. So they had rich and they had poor and they had servants and they had, I'm thinking of the word now, um, they weren't slaves.
Indentured servants.
They were
Yeah.
indentured servants.
Hmm.
Okay, meaning they owed a debt, but there's an opportunity for them to get out from under this. Okay, as a slave, you got no opportunity. You can't get out from under it unless you're dead or your slave master says, okay, you can go. Okay, why would they say, okay, you could go? You're making money for me or saving me money. Still making money for me. The Americans, former Europeans, came over, and now this is the land of the free. We can do what we want to do. And having someone serve and work for us is a good thing. Right? So when people see, oh, that's a good thing, they tend to buy into it, regardless whether it's good or bad. Good people buying the good stuff, bad people buying the bad stuff. But they buy into it because it's good for them. They're not buying into it because it's good for somebody else. You see what I'm saying? I mean, am I
Hmm.
making myself clear? Okay. So this whole thing, like I said, started decades ago, and it's become ingrained in all of us. A lot of us know better, and a lot of us just ain't going to do better. And so the ones like me and you who suffer with this every day, whether we know it, want to accept it, realize it, learned it, or whatever, it's here and it's real. We're living the reality of this practice. Racism is a practice, okay? You're not born racist. You learn to be a racist by the environment that you came up in, the things that you've learned, the things that you hold dear. If my mother told me my father smoked, okay? He enjoyed it. He may have asked me, I don't think he did, but he may have asked me at any point, would you like a cigarette? And I would have told him, hell no, because I know better. I don't like it. It doesn't work for me. I don't see it working for him, but okay. But the point was, he bought into it. And the people who sold tobacco knew it was a problem from day one. They knew it was a problem. But it was all good because they were making money. I'm making a ton of money selling you something that's about to kill you. So at the end of the day, when you're dead, who's going to complain? None. Okay, so any last comments?
Well, yeah. Um, yeah, racism is like is prevalent amongst the people that focus on it, and are affected by it. If you are affected by racism, that's part of your life. Everybody that doesn't see it can't picture it, can't fathom what it's like dealing with it. and that's the reality for some people. Some people's reality is every day they're engulfed in dealing with racial tension and things of that nature. There's other people in different parts of the, America that don't see it. They have white friends, they have Hispanic friends, they all get along, and they look at other people that's dealing with it as, I don't know what's going on over there. It's foreign to me because they don't see it. But like I said, when somebody's perception is reality, and like I said with the media too, if they tell me every day and I buy into it that the guy next door to me that don't look like me wants to kill me, I'm going to buy guns. I'm going to buy ammunition. I'm going to buy, you know, uh, vest. You know what I'm saying? I'm doing all this stuff to protect myself. But who's benefiting from it? The people selling those defensive weapons because they're generating a fear that the person next to me is wants me dead or wants me gone. You know,
Well,
and
I don't want to get hung up on people wanting other people dead. I'm not saying that.
yeah,
Well, okay, so we're on the same page with
got
that. One group is benefiting
yeah,
from the suffrage of another group. Okay, so we're
mm,
cool.
yeah,
Before you continue, I just want to say to Shalonda, I hope I'm pronouncing her name right. Thank you for your comments. Her last point was the information that was provided about the origin of race was very enlightening. Okay, so I want to thank her for that. So we'll please go on. I'm sorry.
okay. Now you good. Um, but as you said, people are benefiting from this. And when you propagate a fear into people, you get a response. I have to protect myself. I have to do this. I have to move. I have to build bigger walls or, get special weapons or protections, or, you know, it's so much that goes into it. And like I said, people benefit off of other people's misery, monetarily.
Hmm.
So if I can give you a few examples and project that across the whole country to make everybody feel the same and they all buy into it, then it's like, well, I'm getting all this money from these people because I got them scared to death. Yes,
Hmm.
like I said, it exists.
Hmm.
But when you say it's being done on a massive scale, like yes, people do. Slavery existed. They took people. They bought Africans from other Africans that they were conquered by other villages in Africa, and they were sold to white people, and white people took them, brought them here to the States, and did what they wanted to with them in order to make themselves wealthy. You know,
Hmm.
um, it's it's the basic business model. I'm gonna get something for nothing or something for little, and I'm gonna use it to enrich myself. You know, and that's what they did. Wrong or right, that's what they did.
Hmm.
Um, and nobody's discounting that. But like I said, the the inventing of the word race, and then having that overshadow everything that a person of color deals with is like that dark cloud that you can't get from under. It's like, well, this is always around me. It affects everything I do. And once I start believing that, I'm mentally enslaving myself because now I have to believe that these people that don't look like me have power over me. And once I buy into that, I'm affected forever for my life. I'm subjugating myself as an individual because I believe that these people have this power. If I once I believe that, they won. If I say, you know what, they might be able to affect this, they might be able to affect that. But there's something in there that I can find that I can do. There's plenty of successful businessmen and women out there of color that have started with nothing and have made substantial moves. But like I said, they still want us to believe that that is not capable. You're not capable to do that. Jay Z started from the streets, hustling. Now he's worth over $1 billion. You gonna tell me? I mean, he wasn't doing anything good at when he was hustling, but he did something, and he put himself in a position that can't nobody take that away from him. Everybody knows who he is. If he walks in the room, you know who he is. He is fame, he is fortune. And I'm not saying that everybody can do it the way he did it, but it's doable. You know what I'm saying? But they
Well,
want us to believe that it's not doable.
yeah, anything is doable. The fact that we had a black president at
Yeah.
one point in time, anything can happen. Um, I think the point here is that we as a people need to understand that this is real and it is happening. And oh yeah, there is hope. I'm not going to say there's no hope. There is hope. The point of it is that who is going to step forward and say, look, we need to do something about this, you know, because this is not right. Now, the point I was going to make a moment ago, it don't take a lot of people to get to the point of making a change, making a difference. And like I said, this issue runs so deep that it may be centuries before it can be overturned, overcome. But that doesn't mean things can't change. Okay, piece by piece, step by step, moment by moment. It doesn't take everybody to do it. But what it does take is some people to say, look, let me get more information about this so I can understand where I can draw the line for myself, where I can start thinking as a Jay-Z may have done, may have, I don't know.
Hmm.
I can make this money and I can do some other things and make a difference. I know selling drugs to my people is not a good thing, not the right thing to do.
Hmm.
But they're going to buy it, so they might as well buy it from me. That I can understand that point of view. And then I'm going to take my money and do the right thing. I understand that, and I'm not trying to be a judge one way or the other. But for those of us who see it differently, as far as let me do the right thing to get the right result type thinking,
Hmm.
then the first thing we need to do is talk about it
Yeah.
to let others understand, get information as to, well, okay, Jay Z was successful, he did it this way. Uh, who's that? LL Cool J did it this way. You know,
LeBron
whatever.
James.
Yeah, all kinds of people did, you know, different ways to get there.
Hmm.
That doesn't mean that those are all ways are exhausted.
Hmm.
That just means that there is a way to do it to get it done.
Hmm.
We just got to start thinking about, and once we start thinking about it, some of us are going to start doing it.
Hmm.
And so, last point,
Hmm.
I'm at the age now, there's not really a whole lot I'm going to get done. So if I talk to you and get you to understand to whatever point, encourage you to talk about it. Someone down the line may be the one that steps up and say, hey, look, I got it. And this is what I'm thinking could work. I'm finished. Okay.
We have touched the subject, but it gets glossed over. Like the gentleman said it himself, generational wealth. You know, we have been programmed to be consumers, and we give, like I said, we giving our wealth, our power away every day under the guise of this is what's going to make you feel better or prosper or whatever. You know, get the girl, get the guy. You know, I mean, we spend billions and billions of dollars every year. If we took that and reinvested in ourselves, I'm not going to say, hey, just buy black. Invest it in yourself, your education, you know what I'm saying, your housing situation. If you don't look like where you live, well, I spend $400 or $500 on a pair of shoes and then have to buy the same $400 or $500 shoes 6 months later. That's a mortgage payment right there. I mean, you could probably step yourself up into another housing situation if you're not liking where you at. You know what I'm saying? But we're programmed to, oh, well, I live in the hood, so I gotta wear these type of sneakers. I gotta wear the Gucci, the Louis Vuitton, and I'm like, because this is what our culture, musical culture, is telling the young folks. It gets ingrained in them, and that's the way they live. And then, oh, well, I'm hustling, or I'm, gang banging, or I'm doing this, that, and the other, which is not benefiting our society at all. It's taking our lives of the young folks and older folks, day in and day out. So we're not able to get to the numbers that we need to even have the say that we need to have. So it's like, one, we need to start with ourselves and say, hey, look, you know, I'm making this money. Why am I giving it to somebody that don't give a darn about me? Saying, let me reinvest in myself, my education, my living situation, my food situation. Have my kids eating good, me eating good? Okay, now I can think clearly. I'm eating healthy. Now, next step, I'm buying property. I'm starting my own business. I'm doing things to benefit myself and my family. And this is where you start getting to that point where, hey, people are looking at me as a success, and I'm seeing myself as a success, and I'm passing the word on, bringing other people on board to be a success. And that's when the culture starts changing, and you have more people being successful, making more money, living better. And then it's like, well, why weren't we doing this 10, 15 years ago? Because it wasn't in the powers that be. They know, hey, we give them something that they like, they'll forget about everything else. They're not going to listen to their mother. They're not going to listen to their auntie. We'll just give them this, and we'll make money hand over fist.
Let me mention a couple of things that Shalonda had pointed out earlier. She says she's a single mother with two young men. While we acknowledge racism, I teach them to try to rise above it. Know your wealth, know your worth. I'm sorry. And the last point she made, excuse me, true. Not many of our people know the difference between an asset versus a liability. Okay, we've had that conversation. So, we're all on the same page with that. And it's not, it is our fault in that we as a people do not turn around and teach what we've learned.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not glossing over the racism issue,
Mm-hmm.
because racism runs deep, not only in finances, but in job opportunities, education, medicine, the whole 9 yards, across the board. So, me going to a school, I went to a white school, okay. Um, I was one of those on the list of, not urban renewal, but what do they call that when you diversifying in
Yeah,
a country?
diversify.
Yeah, diversifying. Yeah. And so what I learned there, I have had opportunity to teach others about. Could I have done more? Yeah, I could have. Did I? I didn't. Okay. But now the table is turned and I'm trying to offer more information. Not teach, but offer information. And something, as the young lady was saying here, Shalonda, about people not knowing the difference between the asset and liability. The next level was you drill down when you talk about assets and liabilities, you got to talk about short-term and long-term assets and liabilities. And we've had that conversation. Talk about, as you pointed out, buying a pair of sneakers that are going to last you 6 months or whatever for $500 versus paying a mortgage payment every month. I'm paying $600 for an apartment. I could pay, if I just step back a little bit, I could come up with 650, 700 and pay a mortgage. Okay? And then at the end of X number of years, own something that probably, more than likely, appreciates in value. So those two concepts, they elude people if you don't take the time to explain it to them. The benefit of, short and long, and appreciation. But anyway, we are running close to the end, so would you?
Admin note.
Uh-huh.
Uh, if you would like to be a participant on the panel, please send us a request on the comment section. If you would like to hear a topic spoken about by myself and my father, or a panelist, send us a message as well.
Okay. With that, we will see you again next week, this time, God willing, and the creek don't rise.
And the creek don't rise.
God bless.